I'm Diana Panchik with Azur Vélo French Riviera Cycling, and I'm here with Joe Dombrowski from Team Sky. Joe, thanks so much for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. This is your second year with Team Sky, and you had some impressive performances last year, including a third place podium spot on the first stage of the Tour of Austria and top 10 finishes at the Tour de Suisse and the Japan Cup. What are your target races for 2014?
Well, I haven't started racing yet this year, but I am supposed to start next week with GP Camaiore and Roma Maxima, a couple one-day races in Italy. I do Coppi Bartoli at the end of March, and then in April I do Liège-Bastogne-Liège and Giro del Trentino. And then in May I go back to the US for a little bit, spend some time at home, and I'll do Tour of California. So looking forward to that, and the team sort of denoted California as my first goal for the year. And I won't really be riding for GC there because we'll have Bradley Wiggins, and I think he'll be going there trying to win. But just, sort of outline that as try and do a good support performance there.
Okay. Have you noticed any major differences between US and European racing at the top level?
Well, I think the biggest difference between racing in Europe and racing in the US is probably the roads, to be honest. In the US, we've got big roads, and it's pretty easy to get to the front when, the race is decisive and positioning is important. It's pretty easy to get there usually, whereas in Europe, a lot of times you're fighting for position on small roads, and sometimes the weather can also play into that. So it's, I think racing in general is just a bit more stressful and requires a bit more sort of racing skill beyond, just physical ability. Racing here in Europe, it's just a bit more technical.
Huh. Do you have any favorite races here in Europe?
Well, last year I got to do a lot of new races, stepping up to the World Tour level. I really enjoyed Tour de Suisse. I think it's a beautiful country. It's well organized. They have really nice roads. The hotels are good. The food is good. So I really like that. I started the USA Pro Challenge in Colorado last year, and that was nice just to get to go back to the US. I got to go home a little bit before and after, and some of my family was out at the race, so that was pretty exciting. And I also enjoyed last year. I did Japan Cup, was my last race of the year, and I'd never been to Japan, and it was such a cool experience. We had 2 or 3 days in Tokyo after the race, and it was awesome. I mean, definitely a place that I'd go back without a bike at some point and just go on a vacation just because I really enjoyed it. And then I guess lastly, any of the races in Italy, I typically really look forward to those. The Italian food's always really good. I like a lot of the Italian races. They always have a lot of climbing and pretty tough stages a lot of times. So, yeah.
What about the US?
Well, I'm looking forward to doing California this year for sure. I don't think we go back to Colorado. But for me, it's nice to do the US stage races, for one, because I get to race in front of friends and family, and just the familiarity of it. Everything about cycling for me now is pretty foreign. I live in France. I'm living in a different country now and racing all over the world, and rarely am I ever racing in my home country where, just things like food and just like the most basic thing, like going to the grocery store. You can get exactly what you want. You know where to get it. And so that I do enjoy about going back for sure.
What foods do you miss the most from America?
Well, it's interesting actually, because I've found things that I miss now that I'm here in France, but also things that I've developed a taste for in France that when I go back, I miss when I'm in the U.S. When I'm here, I love nut butters of all kind, almond butter, peanut butter, cashew butter, which can be a little bit difficult to find. I really like Mexican food. I really like all ethnic foods, but really like Mexican food. And that Nice is pretty international, and you see a bit of everything. But I have yet to find a good Mexican restaurant in Nice.
It's really hard. And black beans.
Yeah,
Can't
they
find
don't
them
really
here.
do that.
So, yeah, talking about living in Nice, this is your second year here. How do you like living and training in the French Riviera?
I actually really enjoy it. The roads here, I love training back home in Virginia. I think it's some of the best riding anywhere, with the exception of the Nice area. Like, I think the riding here is just incredible, and I really have grown to love it. And now we've actually got quite a few Americans that have moved here this year, and my roommate is with BMC, so that helps as well. Like, my first year was a little bit tough because you're living in a new country, and you're absorbing all that while you're sort of stepping up to racing at the top level. And I think now, having some more people that I know here and just being a bit more familiar, it feels a bit more like you're at home rather than just like, you're at hotels and the races and you're traveling around, and you come back to Nice and you feel like you're still almost like at a hotel, like everything's just sort of unfamiliar. But now I've gotten to the point where it's just a bit more comfortable for me.
So you mentioned that there are quite a few American pro riders living and training here. What makes the Riviera such a popular place for pro cyclists?
Well, I think there's a few factors. One, the weather is normally pretty good. We actually have some snow up here in the mountains this afternoon, but that is not the norm. Normally it's pretty warm. I was in knee warmers this morning. And so, the weather's good. The roads are really good. There's great climbs. The Nice airport, if you live in Nice, you can't really be more than, I don't know, 5 to 8K away from the airport. So you're never very far away. And yeah, I mean, it's close to most of the races. It's a good central hub. You can get to all the races in Italy and Spain pretty easily, and anything in the north Nice is a big enough airport that a lot of times you can fly direct to the races, and it's just an hour or something.
Yeah. So what's a typical training day like? What type of ride would you do on a long day? Who would you train with, and what do you generally do before and after your rides?
Well, typical training day really varies. I'll do anything from an easy, sometimes a day completely off, or most recovery days I'll do hour or 2 hours, just easy, ride along the coast, maybe get a coffee with your friends and just kind of chill out. To other days I'll ride as long as 5, 6, sometimes even 7 hours, go into the mountains, do some big climbs. And, some days I'm just out riding and it's just sort of general pace and not really any planned intervals or efforts. And then other days are really highly specific where maybe I'm on my TT bike and out on the valley roads up into the mountains, just sort of doing efforts on that, or going into the mountains and doing some long climbs and doing specific work there. So it really kind of changes day to day. I mean, so it's hard to pin down any one day. I'd say on average, training anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week. And in terms of my routine, I guess I like to ride pretty early normally. I like to get out around 9 o'clock. So I'll typically wake up 7:30, have a good breakfast. I like to get up early enough that I can just take my time, enjoy my breakfast, and not be rushed out the door. Normally I'll do like a good 30 to 40 minutes of core before I go out, and then go out, do my ride, and then if yeah, the one thing I like about starting earlier is if I do say a 4 hour ride and I leave at 9, get home at 1:30, then I can still take a nap in the afternoon, which I feel like is when you're really training hard, getting an hour of sleep in the afternoon and sleeping well each night does, I think that makes a difference for sure.
So, have you made any major changes to your training since you joined Sky?
Well, Sky basically keeps. So I had a coach prior to when I came to the team, Jeremiah Bishop, who is a professional mountain biker and lives close to me back home. And he kind of helped me as I was just getting started in the sport and sort of brought me to where I am now. And at Sky, we all work within the team. There's a coaching staff of 4 or 5 coaches. So I work with them, and the biggest goal last year was just getting the volume up for training. So a lot of times I'd come into a stage race and I'd be doing a 25-hour training week the week before a stage race, and they actually said off the bat, like, this may actually hurt you in the short term, but we think like in your long-term development as a professional cyclist, it's going to be good for you. So that was the biggest change, I think, was just sort of bringing up the volume and that adaptation to that. But in terms of the intervals and that kind of stuff, a lot of it stayed pretty much the same, just the same, but a lot more. And this year, actually, with a lot of us young guys, they've given us a little bit more relaxed race program and are a little bit more toned down with the training, because I think they felt like last year we were maybe training at this level and doing this much training per week or per month or whatever. And then, they wanted to bring us up here and we did it way too fast. And that was, just a bit much for a lot of us to handle. So this year it's a little more graduated approach, which I think will end up being good.
I see. Talking about development, you're obviously a phenomenal climber, and you're also considered a promising GC rider. How is your team helping you develop to fill the role of GC rider?
Well, I think, the key to being a good GC rider is being really complete. You have to be able to do everything. So there's the 2 most obvious aspects where stage races are typically decided. It's time trials and climbs. So, you have to be strong enough that you can time trial and climb well enough. But it's also really important that you don't lose time in what would be considered less decisive stages. Sometimes you have a day that's completely flat, but you might have some crosswinds or technical descents or something like that, where that can cause you to lose time, or even just crashes, which are unpredictable. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about that, but you see oftentimes the best GC riders are always at the front, and it's because it's a safer place to be. If you're up there, you're less likely to get tangled up in a crash. So I think they kind of look at it from all aspects in terms of your development in that role, in that they're going to work with you on the physical development. You're going to work on your climbing, you're going to work on your time trialing, but also you just need to race and get the experience in the peloton. And that doesn't mean that I think you have to do every role within the team. Like, when you're young, you're going to spend a lot of time riding the front and getting bottles and getting rain jackets and doing things that are not glamorous. But, most guys that are sort of the top stage racers in the world have done, every role within the team. And then you kind of have a better understanding of how all that works.
Do you think there's anything that smaller domestic teams in the U.S. could learn from larger international caliber teams like Team Sky?
Well, I think one thing that Sky really does well and benefits from is just organization. They're highly, highly organized, and there's a really pretty tremendous support structure here in place, um, to so that riders can focus completely on performance. Like here, living in Nice, part of the reason that a lot of us Team Sky riders are here is because it's sort of a training base for Team Sky, and they have a team house here, and we have staff here sort of at our disposal to help us. And like tomorrow, for example, um, I've been dealing with a bit of a knee injury in the like through training camp and now into the beginning of the season. So I had a bit of a layoff from training and now getting back into it. And tomorrow, one of our physical therapists is coming by with someone from Retool, and he's going to stop by my house. We'll do some of the Retool bike fitting stuff, go for a ride. One of the soigneurs is coming over in the afternoon for a massage. So it's like, you have a lot of people that are working for you to make sure that you can focus on racing your bike and performing at a high level. And part of that is they have the budget that they can afford to get people there to help people out. But I think, it's something that allocating, smaller teams, maybe they're working on a smaller scale, but they can allocate more of their budget towards that organization and support structure.
Mm-hmm. It must be incredible to have that kind of support. You moved through the ranks really quickly, and you only spent 4 years competing on the road before signing with Team Sky. You impressed the cycling world with your Giro Bio victory in 2012 and your strong showing at other major races. What helped you move through the ranks so quickly? Did you have that kind of support system when you first started racing?
Well, I first started in high school, and I was riding mountain bikes. I had a friend in school that was a mountain bike racer, and he sort of got me into it. And I ended up going to my first bike race ever with him, and it was called the Wednesdays at Wakefield. It's back home in Virginia. We have it's like a midweek training race series, and it's 6 o'clock Wednesday nights, hour long, 4 laps. And I did one and I was hooked, and I just loved it. And I did a bit of mountain bike racing, and then eventually started racing cyclocross, and then got into the road, and just sort of progressed from there. But I guess relatively early on, when I was 18 or so, I started working with Jeremiah Bishop, he's pro mountain biker from Virginia, and works a bit on the side coaching riders. And I think he's 37 now, and sort of looking towards retirement and getting into something else. And I think he wants to move into coaching, and so he started working with me when I was about 18. And he was actually played a big part in my development for sure. Not only in just writing training plans, but he's been doing it for a long time, and he came from pretty humble beginnings and didn't really make it as a pro until a bit later. So he's kind of been around the block, and I think just has a lot of good advice, beyond just training, and has had a lot of the ups and downs. So when you're having those same issues, it's like he's been there before. Right. So he was, definitely pretty critical for my development, I'd say.
Right. Have you thought much about your long-term goals, where you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, I'd like to kind of continue developing as a stage racer, GC type rider. At the moment, for me to continue progressing in that, I'd say I'd really like to try and work on my time trialing, improving that, and then also it's just time in the shoes. Like, you just have to get out there and race your bike. And especially since I came to the sport a bit later, I'd say like maybe I was a bit behind in that, just getting like Peloton hours per se. So I think, yeah, that is the other big thing is just, you know, doing time in the big races, exposing yourself to that top level, and there's a lot of gains to be had in training and getting stronger, but there's equally as many gains to be had in becoming a good bike racer, which isn't necessarily the same.
Right. Just one more question. What advice would you give to amateur riders in the U.S. trying to move through the ranks in competitive cycling?
Well, I would say for one, keep it fun, because I think for you to really be successful in cycling, you really have to enjoy it because it's a lot of suffering, and if you're not having fun, then your heart's not in it. I don't think you're gonna go very far. And also, I think just to keep sort of things in perspective and be patient. I mean, like last year was my first year racing in the World Tour, and when I look back on it, I think like I actually was thinking about staying amateur, racing U23 a whole nother year, but now I've done a year in the World Tour, and you make that step and it's hard, and you see how good everyone is at that top level, and I think maybe sometimes that's a bit discouraging, but if you're in this for the long haul, I'm 22 now, I could do this potentially for another 15 years. I'm gonna say I do have a long career like that. You're gonna look back on now, and it's gonna be a very short window within a pretty long career, and there's gonna be ups and downs, and it's about just overall trajectory for the long term. So I think keeping that in mind when you're kind of absorbing the bumps along the way, because that'll happen too, for sure.
Right. Wow. Well, thanks so much for your time, Joe. Really wish you the best of luck for this race season and for the future. And looking forward to seeing you on the roads and on TV.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.